In this session, we will cover the one-to-many relationship in OutSystems. We will start by defining this type of relationship, and then we will learn how to create a one-to-many relationship in OutSystems, with a quick demo in Service Studio. Let's start by considering this example data model, with the order entity and the customer entity. In this example scenario, we know that a customer can place multiple orders, and that an order can have a customer that requested it. This makes this scenario a perfect example of a one-to-many relationship. To create the relationship, the order entity will have the requested by attribute, of type customer identifier. OutSystems detects that we are referencing the customer entity automatically, by setting the data type of the requested by attribute to customer identifier. This makes the requested by a reference attribute, defining the relationship between the order and the customer. This reference attribute can be mandatory or not, depending on the use case we want to support in our application. If the requested by was mandatory, when adding a new order in the database, we would need to assign to the requested by attribute the value of the ID of the customer that requested the order. Let's see how we can easily create this relationship in Service Studio. Here we are in Service Studio, with our module open, and in the Data tab. We can see the order entity and all its attributes. And also the customer entity and all its attributes. To create a one-to-many relationship between the customer and its orders, we need to add a new attribute to the order entity. This new attribute will represent the customer that requested the order. Let's start by expanding the order entity to see the attributes. To add a new attribute to the entity, we right-click on the entity. And select the Add Entity Attribute option. Set the name to Requested by. Automatically, OutSystems sets the data type of the new attribute to User Identifier. Let's change the data type to Customer Identifier, to create the relationship with the customer entity. Looking at the diagram on the left, we can now see the relationship between the two entities represented. As a summary, the one-to-many relationship is defined by a detail entity that references a master entity. That is done by creating a new attribute in the detail entity that references the master entity, through its data type, which needs to be set to Master Entity Identifier. An entity can have multiple reference attributes. If we look at the example of the order entity, besides the requested by reference to the customer entity, it has 4 more reference attributes, for different master entities. This is actually a scenario that is not that uncommon to find in data models, so just add the reference attributes that make sense to your entity to define the one-to-many relationships that you need in your use case.